All right, welcome back, everybody. We're continuing our look at basic Java and building basic Java programs. Now, one thing that most programs have in common is they have some type of way to interact with the user. Okay, there's not a lot of stuff where you press run and it spits out a result to you. There's usually some type of user interaction. In other words, we need a way to get input from the user. And one of the most basic ways to do that with Java is using a scanner. Okay, that's what we're going to show you in 1.3 today, getting input using a scanner. Okay, now one note on the scanner before we show you some kind of complicated stuff that looks like it might be tricky to memorize. You're not going to be tested on using a scanner or using any other input method on the AP exam. Okay, it's outside the test. So why are we doing this? Well, it'd be kind of a boring class if we didn't have any way to get input for our programs. Okay, so everything we're showing you here today, you'll learn how to use it, you'll get good with it, you use it a lot, but you won't have to memorize stuff like importing a scanner here. Okay, so don't worry about that. Okay, so with that said, to use a scanner, the first thing you need to do is import it. Basically, the basic Java language package doesn't have a lot of stuff going on with it. If you want to use any of the more complicated things, such as a scanner to get input, you actually have to import that from your development environment into your project so you can actually use it. Okay, reason that programming languages do that is it keeps your development environment kind of lighter. You know, on day one, we showed you the thousands of Java libraries. If we had that all loaded and pulled up, ready to go, every time we opened an IDE, it would take forever for the IDE to load. Okay, so by keeping things lighter, we can work quicker and then only load the stuff we need. Okay, so you have to import the scanner first. This is going to be the import statement you'd have just at the top of your program. And when you're importing stuff, you want to try to be as specific as possible. Only import what you need. Again, that's just to keep the program lighter. And then within my program, to use the scanner, I actually have to create it, or I have to instantiate it, we'd say. Okay, we won't be able to explain all this stuff yet, but basically what I need to do first is I need to create a scanner object. So just like when I'm creating a string variable, I'd say string first, or an int variable, I'd say int. Same thing, I want to create a scanner, and then I make a reference variable for it. Now here I could name it anything I want. I've got scan, sometimes you'll say keys, trying to think what else I've seen in classes. SCR, standing for scanner. Okay, so give it any name you want. I like to use scan. And then I have to do an object instantiation where I actually create it. We'll get more into this next chapter. We'll say new scanner object with a parameter system in. Okay, in other words, we want this scanner to take stuff from our keyboard essentially. All right, this will be something that you type in a lot, but maybe don't even think about most times you do it. You just kind of memorize how to do this or copy and paste it from an example. Again, won't be on the exam, but this is how I create a scanner. I need to define the type of object I want. I need to give it a name. Then I need to do this actual creation step, which we'll talk more about in chapter 2 when we get into the nuts and bolts of objects. And then once I have my scanner object, we want to be able to have some methods to use. These will be the methods we use that actually get information from the user. Okay, there's a whole bunch more of these we could use, but the basic ones we'll be using are next int, which will grab an integer from the user, next double, which will grab a double, okay, just next, which will grab any type of character, and then next line, which will grab an entire multi-word string all the way up to the enter key is pressed. Okay, these will be the big ones we use in class. So let's take a look at some code that would use a scanner, what that would look like. So this would be some lines of code within a main method or some other type of method. Okay, so we're excluding the class and the main method. We're just going to focus on the new part today. First thing I got to do, like I said, is create a scanner, and I'm going to call this one scan. That's, like I said, the word I like to use. And then the next thing I use before I get any information from the user, I probably want to prompt them as to what I'm looking for. Okay, otherwise the user's not going to know what to plug in, what we're looking for. So here we're going to print out enter an integer. And when I do that, enter an integer is going to be printed out in the console. And then my program's actually going to pause for a second while it waits for me to input something. Because of this next line of code, int num, so I'm defining a num variable, and I'm going to assign it with my scanner object's next int that it grabs. Okay, so as the program's running, it's going to print enter an integer to console, and then it's going to wait for you to enter some input. Okay, so I'd put something in, let's say like 2001, and it's going to keep waiting until I hit enter. Once I hit enter, most programs or most development environments are going to print what you put in on the same line here. Notice I did a print instead of a print line, so I could get this here, and then I'll move on to the next line. Then my program is going to continue. I now have 2001 stored as the variable num, and if I print num, like we said, it's going to go to the next line automatically and print that out. Okay, so again, typically when you're doing that prompt statement, you use a print instead of a print line so you can get what the user enters on that line here. So breaking that code down further then, that kind of new line of code we showed you, the int num, so I'm defining a integer variable called num. And then I'm using the scan, which is what I named the scanner I created. Again, that could be different names depending on the way you name it. And then that dot next int is my method call. When we're calling methods on objects, we'll use this dot notation, so the object dot method call, and then this is what actually grabs the next int from my kind of input stream from the scan object. And then also we'll just remind you to use a prompt statement. Okay, prompts are used to tell the user what you want. Okay, you can't get the right information if the user doesn't know what the right information is. And just a reminder with that, typically when I prompt, I'm going to use the .print instead of .println or println, okay, just so that when this code prints back out, it's going to give me my prompt and then give me what I enter in right next to it rather than on the next line. Okay, maybe you want it on the next line for some reason, but typically it looks nicer when you keep it on that same line. All right, just walking you through that pattern again. This will be a pattern you get used to. You create a scanner, and you only have to do this once for a program. You won't have to do this for everything you scan in. Okay, so this would be at the top of your program. And then as far as actually getting something, you would prompt the user for what you want. So in this case, enter a double. That will print out enter a double. Program's then going to pause for this step, double num. So I'm defining a double called num again with scan.next double in this case. Okay, so this will be looking for a double value. Now, just like defining a double, it could take an int or a double. Okay, let's say I type in 3.14 and hit enter. That 3.14 is going to be printed on the same line because my prompt statement is a print instead of a print line. And then it's automatically going to move to the next line. When I print that out, it'll print out that 3.14 I just plugged in. We can also use our scanner to get strings. Now, strings is going to work a little different just because there's some different options. We'll show you the differences. So once again, I need my scanner object. Okay, I don't need to create that more than once in a program, but we'll just have it here for this little program with the scanner called scan. We're going to prompt the user. We'll say enter a string. And then, so as we go through this, the prompt will show up. Program is going to pause for this next part here, okay, where I'm going to create a string variable called word. I'm going to set it equal to scan.next. So that's going to give me an opportunity to enter some input. Let's say the input I put in here is I love APCSA, and I hit enter. That's going to print that entire string next to my prompt. And then as far as what's going to get printed off with word is just the I. Okay, scan.next is only going to grab the next one word string. Okay, so once I get to the space with the dot next, it's going to cut me off. Okay, my first word here is I. Suppose I should have used like a two-letter word to show you get both letters. But what's going to get printed when I print word is just that I there. Dot next won't take the entire line you put in. It's only going to go up till the first space. Okay, that way you can get individual words plugged in. If I want to get an entire line of input at the same time, I'm going to use the dot next line instead of just the dot next. Okay, so again, I have my scanner called scan. I'm going to prompt the user enter a string, and this time we'll say string sentence equals scan.next line. Okay, so now when my prompt statement runs, same thing, enter a string. I'm going to plug in I love APCSA to my input box. When I hit enter, it's going to print the entire thing once again. And now when I go system.out.println sentence, since I use next line, it's going to grab the entire line of string, and it's going to print that whole thing out. Okay, so that's the difference between next and next line. Next will grab your next word up until the space, whereas next line is going to grab the entire line that you plug in up until you hit enter, okay, to enter it in. All right, next thing I want to do is show you an issue that happens using the scanner when I try to write a program that looks for both numbers along with strings. Okay, so let's walk you through what this is supposed to do. Okay, I don't have it on here just because I was out of room. So let's say I define my scanner called scan up above. Okay, so we're going to use that scan. And like I said, I don't need to redefine it every time I scan something. Okay, but it's supposed to prompt the user for an integer and then use next int to store a int variable. And then prompt the user for a sentence and use next line to store a string variable, and then print the two of those off, number, colon, with the string, the sentence. Here's what's going to happen with this one, though. We'll get to our first prompt statement, enter an integer. Let's say I type in a 34. And with this, when I hit enter, all in one step, I'm going to get all this stuff here in the program will quit, it'll be over. It'll never give me a chance to enter a sentence. Okay, here's what happened. When I hit enter on this next int, the 34 came here. Then the prompt came, enter a sentence. And when I get to this next line, rather than waiting, what it's going to do is it's going to pick up the enter that I plugged in when I did the 34 from my input stream. And so essentially it's saving as the sentence nothing but the enter key. Okay, so all in one step, it's going to prompt, it's going to grab the enter, and then it's going to print out this num colon sentence, where sentence just isn't anything, it's just the enter key. Okay, so that's the issue we have when we mix numbers and next line. Next line picks up the enter, so I need to make a way to make it so it doesn't do that. I'll show you the fix in a second here. All right, so here's the fix to that same program, and the only difference is I have this extra scan.nextLine call after I do my next int. So let's walk you through what's happening here. I'm going to prompt the user for an integer. Let's say I say 34 into my input box and hit enter. It's going to put the 34 there, and then this extra scan.nextLine, what that's going to do is it's going to grab up and basically throw away the enter I just clicked. Okay, what I could do is I could have a dummy variable there, like string dummy equals scan.nextLine, so I could actually store that enter somewhere. But I don't need that enter, so I'm just going to basically grab it and disregard it. Okay, so this takes care of my enter. Now we pick up the enter. The program will prompt and then pause, waiting for you to plug something in and say enter again. So let's say I plug in hi there and say enter. Now it's going to print off that value I put in, and at the same time print off this print statement, num plus colon sentence. There's my 34, and there's my hi there. Okay, so again, the difference is, or the fix here was, before I go from scanning a number to a sentence where I'm going to use next line, I need to call this extra next line to kind of gobble up the enter I put on the number before I can scan in a sentence. Okay, we've got some exercises set up to specifically remind you about that and help you practice kind of putting that extra scan.nextLine in. That you'll get to as you start going through the homework. All right, a couple other tricks I can do with that scan.nextLine deal. I can add a pause to my programming using it. Okay, so here, let's say I prompt the user system.out.print, press enter to continue. This would be something you might want to do if you just displayed a bunch of information to the user. You want them to actually take a second to read it before they move on to the program. So if I do this, if I print out, press enter continue, and then do this scan.nextLine, basically what that's going to do is it's going to pause the program until I hit enter, or until I type stuff in and put enter. It's not going to move on until I actually hit enter, okay, in the input box. Okay, so a nice way to kind of add a break to your program so it doesn't all run together. Okay, we'll show you some examples where you'd want to do something like that. Okay, a few other things I can do. I can scan multiple values on the same. Okay, a couple other things I could do. I can also use my scanner to read multiple values at the same time. So let's say I make my scanner. I say enter some ints as my prompt, so put a few different ones in. And let's say I enter 7 space, 5 space, 3 space, 1 space, 8 space. I've got spaces in between all those. Okay, what's going to happen then when I hit enter is my scanner is going to individually assign an int to each of these for my print stream. Okay, going and stopping when I get to a space. So when I go to print these then, the int 1 will be the 7, the first number I plugged in. The int 2 would be the 5, the second number I plugged in. The int 3 would be the 3, the third number I plugged in. And then this 1 and this 8 would be kind of waiting in my input stream, and I could do something with those later, or I could disregard them by just doing a scan.nextLine, and that would clear those out. Okay, so that's how you can grab multiple numbers, okay, from the same kind of input statement. As long as they're separated by spaces, this will work. And I can do the same thing with strings using the scan.next method. So same thing, we've got a scanner, we'll prompt the user enter a sentence. And let's say for this input I enter how are you. What's going to happen then is my string variable 1, when I assign it to scan.next, that's going to grab the entire first word. Okay, so it's going to grab the entire how up until the first space. And then string 2 will get assigned to the next word up until the next space, so R, and string 3 will be assigned to the U here. So when I go and start printing this off, all on different lines, okay, 1 will just be the how, printing 2 will be the R, printing 3 will be the U. Okay, so similar to the next int, okay, just grabbing the next string using that next method. All right, there you go. So that's how the scanner works. That's how we can start grabbing input for simple Java programs. Syntax-wise, there's kind of a lot of stuff going on, but remember, you don't have to memorize this stuff for the AP exam. And also, it's things we'll be using all semester long, all year long, okay, so you'll get good at it. And even if you're copying and pasting from other programs, like we said, no big deal, not stuff you have to memorize. Okay, so start working on programs, cranking out code, and we'll see you guys later.